The night I found myself standing on that bridge, knuckles white against the cold railing, tears streaming down my face as I stared into the dark waters below. That was the moment everything changed. Growing up in a Christian household, I had always known about God, attended church every Sunday, and even led Bible studies in college. But somewhere along the way, my faith had become hollow, a shell of religious routine rather than a living relationship. It was January 2018. I had just lost my job of 8 years. My marriage was crumbling under the weight of unspoken resentments, and the diagnosis of clinical depression had finally given a name to the darkness that had been consuming me for years. Throughout my childhood, Jeremiah 29:11 had been my parents' favorite verse to quote whenever life got difficult. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Standing on that bridge, those words felt like a cruel joke. How could God claim to have good plans for me when everything was falling apart? Little did I know that in my darkest hour, when I felt most abandoned by God, He was actually closer than ever before, and this moment would become the beginning of a profound transformation that would redefine my understanding of faith entirely. The months leading up to that night had been a gradual descent into hopelessness. After losing my position as marketing director due to company downsizing, I found myself unable to secure new employment despite dozens of applications and interviews. My wife Jessica and I had been growing apart for years, communicating only about practical matters, our conversations tense and superficial. When she suggested we take a break, and I moved into a small apartment across town, the isolation intensified my depression. I tried everything to pull myself out: self-help books, therapy, medication, even throwing myself into church activities hoping to reconnect with God, but nothing penetrated the emptiness. I prayed mechanical prayers that felt like they were hitting the ceiling, read my Bible without comprehension, and plastered on fake smiles at church while inwardly questioning if God had abandoned me. My closest friend Michael reached out repeatedly, sensing something was wrong, but I pushed him away, ashamed of my struggles and feeling like a fraud. That night on the bridge represented the culmination of my despair. I couldn't see any way forward, couldn't imagine the pain ever lifting. As I stood ready to surrender to the darkness, a voice called out behind me, "Hey, wait." It was a stranger, an elderly man walking his dog who had spotted me from the path. "Whatever you're thinking, son, it's not the answer," he said gently, approaching slowly with compassion in his eyes that somehow broke through my numbness. If this testimony is touching your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories of God's amazing grace with others who need encouragement. The stranger's name was Robert, and though I initially resisted, something about his quiet confidence compelled me to step back from the railing and talk with him. As we sat on a nearby bench in the cold night air, he shared his own story of despair decades earlier and how God had intervened. "God doesn't promise us an easy life," Robert told me, "but He promises never to leave us alone in our suffering." He opened a worn Bible to Psalm 41:3, reading words that pierced my heart. "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God." For the first time I realized I had been demanding God fix my circumstances, when what I really needed was for Him to be present with me in them. Robert and I prayed together, and though nothing in my external situation changed that night, something shifted within me. A tiny spark of hope reignited. The next morning, instead of going through motions of prayer, I poured out my raw, honest pain to God. I stopped pretending I had it all together and admitted my brokenness, my doubt, my anger. That vulnerability became the foundation for a genuine relationship with God, rather than the performance-based faith I had practiced before. I began attending a small group Robert recommended, where I found others who were wrestling honestly with faith amid life's challenges, and through their stories and support, Scripture began to come alive in new ways. Over the following months, subtle changes began appearing in my life. The depression didn't magically disappear, but I found strength to seek proper treatment without shame, recognizing that God works through medical professionals too. My prayer life transformed from formal recitations to authentic conversations with God that included both lament and gratitude. Instead of measuring my spiritual worth by church attendance or Bible knowledge, I began recognizing God's presence in small daily moments, a beautiful sunset, a meaningful conversation, even in tears shed during honest prayer. My relationship with Jessica didn't immediately heal, but as I stopped blaming her for my unhappiness and focused on my own spiritual growth, I found courage to reach out and suggest counseling. The counselor helped us see how we had both been expecting the other to fill voids only God could fill. Slowly, painfully, we began rebuilding our foundation on honesty rather than performance. My career path took an unexpected turn when a volunteer opportunity at a non-profit serving homeless individuals opened into a part-time position. Though it paid less than my corporate job, the work aligned with my growing desire to serve others rather than chase success. Through all these changes, I still struggled with doubt, still had days when depression clouded my vision, still sometimes questioned God's timing. The difference was that I no longer saw these struggles as faith failures, but as opportunities for deeper dependence on God. My small group witnessed this transformation, with one friend commenting, "You're less polished now, but far more real, and your faith is actually contagious because of it." Today, 3 years after that night on the bridge, I stand in awe of God's faithfulness through the darkest valley of my life. Jessica and I have rebuilt our marriage on a foundation of authentic faith and vulnerability, attending counseling regularly, and leading a support group for couples facing similar challenges. The non-profit work has become my full-time vocation, using my marketing skills to help those experiencing homelessness find dignity and hope. Depression remains part of my story, but it no longer defines me. I've learned to recognize warning signs and reach out for both professional help and spiritual support when darkness threatens. Most significantly, my understanding of God has been completely transformed. I no longer see him as a distant deity demanding perfection, but as the compassionate Father who meets us in our brokenness. Through my journey, I've discovered the profound truth of 2 Corinthians 12:9, where God promises, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Looking back, I can see how God was working even in my darkest moments, not causing my suffering, but redeeming it for purposes greater than I could imagine. If you're in that valley right now, questioning whether God hears you or cares about your pain, please know that sometimes our deepest wounds become the places where God's light shines most brilliantly. The God who met me on that bridge is the same God who seeks you in your darkness. Thank you for joining me on this journey of faith. If you found hope or encouragement in my story, please consider sharing this video with someone who might need these words today. Subscribe to this channel for more testimonies of God's faithfulness, and join our community in the comments below by sharing a verse that's sustaining you in your own walk with Christ. May God bless you as you continue seeking